Hello, welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm giving my on second thought on Man on the Moon. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, you should click pause, go watch it, come back, and we can talk about it then. You might not like it though. Not that this movie isn't great. It is great. I would recommend it to everybody to see it. But it is odd. It is a bit peculiar. Not because the movie is weirdly made. It's just about a very peculiar person. Because in case you don't know, Man on the Moon is a 1999 film directed by Milos Forman and starring Jim Carrey. It follows the life of Andy Kaufman, who was a very strange comedian, I guess. He was more of a evil scientist in a way. And it's true that everything he did was for comedic purposes in a way. They were always funny to somebody, but it was usually funny to him. Now, sometimes people who were in on the joke found it funny too, whether that was friends, family, or just audience members that understood his weird way of being funny and weird way of thinking. But he's not the typical comedian, and you'll understand if you've seen it already, or if you just let me explain it. I guess that's what I'm supposed to do as a movie critic. But so what he might do is he might go on a weird tour where he wrestles women and abuses them and says that women are disgusting and stuff like that. Now, he was doing that as a sort of meta commentary on wrestling and the weird culture that it has around it, and making fun of the South and some different stereotypes down there. But a lot of people took it literally because he treated it like it was literal. He treated it like it was real for him. And so a lot of people didn't get that, and that's what he did, was he enjoyed and found it hilarious to trick people, fool them into thinking that he was something other than he was. For another example, he had another moment where he had a TV show that he tried to magnetize a strip wrong, and so that it came onto the screen wrong to make it look like your TV was broken. Now, that can be hilarious if you're in on the prank, but to the average person, it's just, oh, my TV's not working, so they hit it, and then it starts working, right? Because it was on a timer where it went for 5 seconds or whatever. That's all odd, and it's very funny at times if you're in on it, but like I said, nobody really was. Now, people eventually picked up on it and thought that it was funny, but many more people got sick of it and moved on from it. So what makes this movie so interesting is that it's obviously a biopic about him, but it's also the first time that Jim Carrey decided that he was going to do a thing called method acting. Now, in case you don't know what method acting is, it is a style of acting, a training of acting, where you get so deeply ingrained into your character that you actually believe that you are the character and do not leave character from day one of filming or beyond until you are done filming the last scene of the movie. And so that's what Jim Carrey did, was he became Andy Kaufman in his mind. So convincingly so that he was able to have conversations with Andy Kaufman's family, who came to him to have these talks to relive and kind of work through some issues and all these different things that, you would with family members. He was able to do that, and if you talk to him, he might say that he was possessed by the spirit of Andy Kaufman. There's a lot of weird stuff going on there, but the point is, his acting in this movie is ridiculously good. And it's a very interesting movie in its own right too, because the movie has a bit of a spirit of Andy Kaufman. It is restrained a bit. It is not full Andy Kaufman. It doesn't go full Andy Kaufman, but for example, the movie starts with the closing credits. That's very Andy Kaufman-y. Now, I've heard complaints that if it was a real Andy Kaufman movie, it would have ran the full closing credits and then had another 15 minutes of black silence and then started the movie. Sure, okay, you could go full Andy Kaufman and they didn't, but that doesn't mean that this movie didn't have the spirit of Andy Kaufman to it, because it did. It also, at the same time, was a fairly straightforward biopic. It didn't mess with the audience too much. It was just mainly that one incident and maybe one or two other moments, but for the most part, it is a pretty straightforward biopic. But that's not a bad thing. It's still a good movie. It's expertly directed, it was very well written, and the acting is phenomenal across the board. Like I said, of course, it had a phenomenal performance by Jim Carrey, but it also had great work done by Danny DeVito, Paul Giamatti, and Courtney Love. And it does a great job representing and showing who this character is. It's not overly in-depth to the point of boredom, but it doesn't skim over everything. It's able to show a little bit of everything and not feel like a documentary or a complete over-the-top drama. It just feels like a pretty well-paced story. Now, you may not learn his entire life story from watching this movie, but it's not supposed to be a documentary. If you want a documentary, you can watch a documentary. This is a movie that touches upon the important parts, at least the important parts according to the filmmakers. I think it's extremely well told. I think that the pacing is phenomenal, and I think that the fact that Jim Carrey inhabited the being and personality of Andy Kaufman really did spread out into this movie and infect the movie making process to make this whole movie feel authentic and genuine. Because you couldn't have made this movie about such a character without really having the right feel to the movie. And this movie does, because it does touch on the oddness and the weirdness and the craziness of this character. But it also touches on the more real and genuine and sentimental side of him as well. Because if, in case you don't know, Andy Kaufman dies due to a terminal illness at the end of this film. Uncurable terminal illness takes his life, or does it? And that's what's so good about this movie, is that it has the zaniness, and then it has the sentimental side to it too, but then it makes you scratch your head at the end going, wait, was I just tricked by that sentimentality? Was that all a joke that I wasn't in on? Because, once again, in case you don't know, if you haven't seen it yet, the movie ends with a character that Andy Kaufman often played doing a stage show. And when Andy Kaufman wasn't doing that character, if for whatever reason they need to be in the same place at the same time, that character was played by his manager, who's played by Paul Giamatti in the film. And it shows that character up on stage after Andy Kaufman has died. And then the camera pans, and you see Paul Giamatti. So who's the character played by? And you don't know. So is Andy Kaufman alive or dead? You don't know, because that's actually a conspiracy that a lot of people, including some of the family members of the Kaufman household, they believe he is actually still alive and he faked his death. Because that would be the ultimate prank to do. Is it true? I don't know. I don't care though. The fact that this movie portrayed it that way is the perfect and only way that it could have been portrayed. But in the end, is the movie perfect? No. Is it expertly written and directed? It's good, but you could argue that it's not perfect either. But is it hilarious? Sometimes. It's also really cringy sometimes. But all of these pieces put together is what Andy Kaufman was. He was in no way perfect. He was in no way flawless. He was in a lot of ways cringy. And most of his jokes didn't land intentionally. And some of them were only funny in retrospect. And some of them were only funny in idea alone, but not in actual execution. And that's a lot of what this movie represents. I'm not saying that they purposely didn't make the movie perfect, but I'm saying that they didn't necessarily worry about making it perfect either, because who would that be representative of? Not Andy Kaufman. And honestly, I think that all comes together to make this one of the best biopics I've ever seen. I'm not exaggerating, I think it honestly is. Because this character, the subject matter of Andy Kaufman, is purposely, as all biopics are, shown in retrospect. And that's the best and only real way to look at Andy Kaufman and his career and his jokes is in retrospect. Because that's how he intended them to be. His jokes were rarely funny in the moment, except to him. His jokes were rarely funny in practice. But the idea and the fact that it happened is what made it funny. So what other way to look at such a character and such a person but in a biopic form and a looking back and a remembrance of that character? That's the best and only way to look at that guy, because that's the best way, that's the way he wanted to be remembered. I love this movie. I know that it's got quite a divisive score. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Roger Ebert gave it an 88. But overall, its Metascore is a 58. And I think that's pretty fair too, because I think just as many people didn't get Andy Kaufman, a lot of people, just as many, would not get his biopic either. So the ones that understand it, the ones that get it, the ones that are in on it, I think will love this movie. And everybody else will kind of just shake their heads in annoyance. And that's fine. That's what Andy Kaufman would want too. So yeah, I love this movie. I think it's great, but what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks guys,